Hello and welcome to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name's Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney at the firm. Today's review, we're going to be looking at some AI terms. I had a quick look and it seems like this particular service is for video conferencing. Now, I presume that's like, Zoom, similar. I can't be too sure. One of the first things that I usually ask clients for is to provide me insight into their products and services and how they work, which is why it's really important to provide good documentation to your lawyers so that they can give you good advice when it comes to drafting these terms. This was last updated March 26, 2024, so it's actually coming up upon 2 years. I've talked about this in other reviews. I think it's really important for companies to think about the changes in the law and how they may influence the terms that are being offered to their customers. We're in 2026 now. March is 2 months away. So there have definitely been changes in the privacy law since this time. There has been the introduction of artificial intelligence legislation in this time. Now, I don't know the geographies where the video conferencing service or platform is being provided, but definitely if it's being provided in the European Union, there is a number of different guidance that's coming out interpreting the EU AI Act that may influence the terms of service that are being provided here that may have changed since March 26, 2024. So it's really important for businesses to be cognizant of reviewing their terms on a periodic basis. I think for artificial intelligence specifically, the periodic review should be far more frequent than other industries for a fact. Let's go to the privacy piece. I like that it's provided what its service is. It seems that the service is a web, software, and mobile-based platform. Our service analyzes engagement and participation in video conferencing through video and audio content, both of which are personal data, and other content, such as messages, texts, photos, personal data, and other materials as applicable that you share through or upload to the services. You retain ownership of your user content, and except for the license you grant in Section 3B, you retain all other rights in and to your user content. In order to provide the service to you, we need certain rights to access, analyze, and use your user content. For this purpose, you grant Read AI a non-exclusive, royalty-free, worldwide, fully paid, and sub-licensable license to use, reproduce, and analyze your user content only for the purpose of creating, providing, and improving our services without compensation to you and or your third party. Now, I just want to highlight this sentence because we've talked a bit about the responsibilities of a data controller and a data processor as it pertains to service provision. Now, this sentence, you can tell who is going to be the data controller because they have limited their use of the user content to creating, providing, and improving your services. Now, a data processor, who in this case would be Read AI, they operate on the instructions of the data controller. The data controller determines the means and purpose of processing. If you are procuring a service from another business in order for your own internal business operations, you are a data controller because you have the means and then you also have the purpose. The purpose is your business operation. That's not something that's influenced by Read AI. That's all on you. Now, we're not going to go into too much detail about other different ways in which businesses can liaise with each other because there's also the opportunity to be independent controllers to entities, and then there's also a joint controllership, which I don't think is the case here, but it's something that should be discussed with a privacy counsel. But the sentence that I've highlighted here essentially alludes to the fact that they're only going to use the data to provide you the service. They're not going to use it outside of those instructions, which fits into the definition of what a data processor is. When you post or otherwise share user content on or through our services, you understand and agree that your user content and any associated information, such as a username or profile photo, both of which are personal data, may be visible to others. You hereby irrevocably waive any moral rights or other rights with respect to attribution of authorship or integrity of materials regarding user content that you may have under any applicable law or under any legal theory. Let's go to the privacy piece. Our services include the text, graphics, images, photographs, videos, illustrations, and other content contained therein or resulting from the services, and all intellectual property rights therein or thereto are owned by Read AI or our licensors and are protected under both United States and foreign laws. Now, I want to talk a little bit about ownership. Without understanding the product in depth and looking at the technical specifications, I would not be able to opine related to this ownership section. But one thing I will say that I think is valuable of note is that Just because you are a data controller doesn't necessarily give you ownership of certain intellectual property belonging to your service provider. So be very cognizant of that as a customer. In order for us to provide our services, you agree that we may process. I've talked a lot about processing on the channel. Processing is a very broad term, which is any operation or set of operations on personal data, and it encompasses any time you touch personal data, essentially. So if you use personal data, if you're viewing personal data, if you're extracting personal data from one repository to another, if you're deleting personal data, and if you're storing personal data. Now, that's not an exhaustive list of what constitutes processing, but it's a good idea of what you can be thinking about as a customer when you see the word process when it comes to different AI terms. Every tool that you decide to procure is going to have its own manner or method in which the tool can be used, and it's your responsibility to understand how that interacts with personal data. I presume that these terms of services are not an exclusive document, meaning I believe that there's probably a master service agreement and a data processing agreement that are reviewed in tandem in order for the services for Read AI to be provided to a customer. And that may be why there's only this small section about transfer and processing data. That being said, I think it's really important for them to note, it seems like the services are definitely provided at least in the United States. But it says here, in order for us to provide our services, you agree that we may process, transfer, and store information about you in the United States and other countries where you may not have the same rights and protections as you do under the local law. This gives me the inclination that Read AI is not just providing to customers and processing personal data in the United States, it's probably processing personal data in the European Union too. And the reason that's important to note for businesses in general is because just because you're headquartered in the United States doesn't mean that you're absolved of responsibilities to privacy laws outside of the United States. If you meet the threshold in other geographies where your products and services are being offered, you have obligations and responsibilities there. And it's your responsibility to know what those responsibilities are. And you can generally get insight into those responsibilities by liaising with a privacy lawyer. I will say that of many of the terms that I've reviewed, the AI terms, there's definitely been more information about the processing of personal data related to inputs and outputs. I'm just going to actually search for it because I am surprised that the only section on this Read AI terms, given that they're a video conferencing service provider, doesn't really talk much about inputs and outputs. And maybe it's that they distribute that to customers on a technical documentation and it doesn't form part of the terms. It may also be that that information is available in a master service agreement. The comment that I want to make about that is there's no which way in order for an organization to meet its privacy obligations on one document. As long as it's applicable to the customer and it is being distributed, then most businesses are going to be compliant. You don't have to talk exclusively about inputs and outputs on your terms of service if it's something that you've put on your master service agreement or it forms part of an additional AI addendum, which I'm beginning to see more and more of. I thought it was valuable to say this because I think a lot of AI companies are trying to think of how best to provide insight to their customers that may not be overwhelming. Not every terms of service is going to provide every single insight that a customer needs to know when it comes to processing data. I will say that for other reviews that I've done on this channel, we have seen more information about input and output data. And the other thing that I didn't see much of on this page is I didn't see much in terms of definitions. I think it would be valuable, irrespective of the document that's being distributed to a customer, having definitions that customers traditionally wouldn't have insight into if they are not legal personnel. Because I'm able to understand what different provisions mean because I've been doing this for a while. But for somebody that is not a legal professional, it might be difficult to understand what these terms are about. And it looks like I don't know this for a fact, but it may be that they're distributing a lot of different documentation, which is why they've probably felt comfortable to not have updated this document in 2 years. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you have questions or you're looking for privacy counsel, take a look at my description. If you like this type of content and you find it interesting to see what's happening in the privacy space, subscribe to my channel and I'll see you in another review.